Good afternoon, Commissioners, members of the public. I'd like to start just with a moment of silence for the victims of the shooting over the weekend. I think we feel horrible about that whole event happening in our community, and we just take a pause for a minute. Good afternoon. Thank you for making time for this. Now, we tried a different format than we've done before. This is going to be me preliminary budget that I'm presenting to you, not in the commission meeting, but this afternoon, so you can see what we're talking about. You have the PowerPoints in front of you, and you can have any questions you want to have. Budget's complex, and 26 is no exception. To make sure we get through content effectively, I'd ask you to save questions till the end. I promise you'll have time for discussion. We've done this presentation 3 times now, and we've got it down, so I know you'll have time for questions. As a city, we continually challenge to fund growing service expectations, rising operating costs, and competitive wages, all within an environment of constrained revenue. This year also introduced 2 major shifts: the implementation of state-imposed property tax revenue cap and the integration of a new public safety sales tax. I first want to acknowledge the change in how we approach the budget this year, which you're all very aware. The introduction of an open budget workshop provided meaningful dialogue between the commissioners and department heads. I hope you all like that, because that's a different way to really let you see the nuts and bolts of how you make a budget. Susan Thompson had asked for different members to have a 2%, 5%, or 10% reduction, and she had those all presented to you so you could kind of see the mix of what we could have offered. It also allowed for valuable input from the public, what they expect from our city government, what trade-offs are willing to consider, and what matters most to them. And yes, we heard Northborough Library is very important to people, and the arts as well. Well, this is referred to as a mayor's preliminary budget. The reality in this budget really is it's a commissioner's budget for the city of Fargo, developed collaboratively with staff and community insight. The evening's action at the commission meeting will be procedural, approving the maximum property tax revenue that being levied under state law. You can make further cuts as we go through, but that's the highest we can go as far as our tax levy. This is largely set by the legislature's 2025 action to cap municipal property tax revenue growth at 3% plus new growth. The final budget will be presented to the commission approval for September 29th. With the public hearing scheduled September 15th. We continue to encourage the public to engage in the weeks ahead. The purpose of the principles, how did we get the budget? The following principles guided the development of the 2026 preliminary budget to ensure fiscal responsibility, service excellence, and long-term sustainability. These are the messages we got from the public and from my commissioners. Achieve structural balance. Align ongoing service delivery and staffing expenditures with sustainable, anticipated recurrent revenues. Strengthen our fiscal resilience. Proactively build and maintain adequate reserve levels to mitigate unforeseen financial challenges. Optimize service revenues. Ensure an accurately and comprehensively billing for all city services provided, maximizing legitimate revenue streams. Support workforce viability. Responsible, compensate existing staff, particularly recognize the evolving landscape within the public sector to attract and retain talent. Foster collaborative government. Engage the City Commission in comprehensive and transparent budget development process. Integrate key legislative and initiated measure changes. Incorporate the new state property tax and the public safety sales tax revenue and expenditure impacts into the budget framework. And finally, enhance regional service efficiency. Evaluate opportunities for shared participation in regional and local services to optimize resource utilization and cost effectiveness. Now, Susan Thompson will look to the past and how she develops a budget and what she uses to influence where we are today.
A little further into the presentation, we'll pick up where we left off at the budget workshop. But first, we're going to briefly walk through the chronology of the budget process. Every year, the budget team starts with the current budget, which was approved the previous year. Column A represents the 2025 general fund budget approved last September. The 2025 budget is balanced at $132,344,952. At the Finance Committee meeting in February, we went through the general fund specific revenue and expense in detail, along with trending and anticipated changes. The message then, and the message now, is that core general fund revenues have not been keeping up with the increases in the general fund expenses. Recent budgets have been balanced, but included interest income, mill increases, and some one-time funding, including COVID funding and transfers in. This slide illustrates the fundamental challenges in building the 2026 budget. Our revenues are flat, but our expenses continue to rise across multiple areas. Listed on the screen are the 5 main categories of general fund revenue. We're seeing stagnation in key revenue streams, particularly in the general fund. The new property tax cap limits our ability to grow revenues at the same pace as our costs. State aid is steady, but not increasing enough to offset inflation of service expansion. The mayor will address some of the expense challenges.
So when we look at human capital, our people are our greatest asset and also our greatest investment. Wage pressures, health insurance increases, and retention challenges all drive up personnel costs. We included a 3% COLA this year, but we're still facing long-term questions about how much to remain competitive and sustainable. Facilities. Our facilities are aging and the cost to operate and maintain them continues to rise. From HVAC to roof system to routine upkeep, deferred maintenance becomes more expensive the longer it's delayed. Service expectations. Fargo continues to grow, and with that comes growing expectations for service. Residents expect responsive, modern services, and those expectations don't pause when revenues flatten. Technology. Technology helps us operate smarter, but the investment needed to stay secure and up-to-date is substantial. From cybersecurity to software licensing, our digital infrastructure is a rising cost center. Community growth. We're proud of Fargo's continued growth, but growth also comes with costs. Whether it's snow removal in new neighborhoods or expanded fire coverage, community expansion directly impacts our budget needs. Susan will talk about our revenue and property tax cap. It's kind of a complex formula, so it's good that she understands it.
So we're going to move into the next step of the budget process. So as I said, the budget process is to start with the prior year. Then we factor in anticipated revenue changes and department budget requests. This year, there are a few items we want to specifically address through separate slides. So column B1 is the anticipated changes in the baseline department requests. Column B2 represents the public safety sales tax. So as I mentioned this several times this spring because I wanted to make sure you understood that while the net impact to the general fund is 0, we're going to increase both our revenues and our expenses by nearly $5.9 million. Column B3 is the priorities of a cost of living adjustment and our anticipated health insurance cost increase. Column 4 represents transit. While transit is an enterprise fund and doesn't belong with the general fund, it does impact the general fund because we transfer monies from the general fund to transit, so we need to pay attention very closely to transit. The good news with transit is that there is no change from 2025, though the transfer will remain at $3.5 million. And then the 5th item is property tax revenue cap and the implications for 2026 general fund. The implication is a net $3 million in increase in revenues. So we're going to start with the property tax cap calculation. As we know, the North Dakota legislature enacted property tax revenue caps effective for the 2026 budget. We went through this in great detail in June, and you'll probably be glad to know that I don't plan to go through that much detail. If you have questions, we can discuss it. But the key points are that cities can assess up to the greater of either 3% of the base year levy or 3% of the adjusted year levy. The adjusted year includes new growth. Fortunately for Fargo, we do experience significant new growth, and we're able to use the adjusted year levy. So our cap of 3% is $50,365,690. This slide is a little more complicated. What I'm proposing to do here is reconcile that 50 million number that we just talked about with what is reflected on the general fund property line. So we start with the max revenue tax levy, which is the $50 million at the top. For the preliminary budget, the budget team is proposing that we continue with the equivalent of 2 mills to the airport. To calculate that number, we use the 2024 levy plus 3%. So the net of that then becomes the gross to the city of $48.6 million. Then, as we talked about at the budget workshop and the finance committee, we always budget property tax at 95% due to the discount that most people take advantage of. And then there's a few other items that we need to roll into that line item: mobile home taxes, prior year levy, and delinquent levy. So our property tax revenue, so to speak, is $46.8 million. However, one more complication: the veterans and the homestead credit, while those are actually replacement property tax revenues, that money does come from the state, so I do have to show that in the state revenue line item. The 2026 budget fully incorporates the voter-approved public safety sales tax, and this marks the first full year of its operational impact. We anticipate sales tax revenue of $8.67 million. That revenue is allocated out to 3 different funds. The general fund is just under $5.9 million. Please be clear that these specific funds will be 100% allocated to police and fire, but we do have to transfer them into the general fund to be able to spend the dollars. The second fund is capital fund. That's going to be used for vehicles, so that's just under $1.8 million. And then we're also transferring out $638,000 to a reserve fund, and that is for future fire upgrades once the fire department has their facility study completed. The point here that we want to make is that the public safety sales tax represents 4% of the general fund, of the new proposed general fund. These funds are being used as intended to support police and fire operations and cover the cost of growth approved in prior budgets. Public safety, it includes the public safety sales tax implementation plan, 12 new public safety personnel, new or expanded technology, and ongoing public safety operations expense. This also gives us a sustainable funding source for public safety and allows us to plan more confidently around staffing, equipment, and emergency response.
Compensation. Our workforce is the core of city operations. This budget supports them in 3 key ways. 3% COLA. We're proposing a 3% cost of living adjustment to keep pay competitive and reflect the rising living costs. Healthcare costs. The health premiums are raising significantly. We're exploring plan changes to manage those increases responsibly. Compensation study. We're also recommending a citywide compensation study to guide long-term decisions around pay and retention and quality. This is something we have talked about for years, and we need to find a way to make this happen, especially for our non-public safety employees. Transit. 2026 budget also reflects a major transition in transit operations. We're going to internalize the workforce. All MAT bus drivers will be city employees beginning January 1st, 2026, giving us greater control over quality scheduling and performance. Operation efficiencies. We streamlined routes, restructured fares, and optimized operations, all without major service disruptions. Regional partnerships. We'll continue to work closely with state agencies and local government to coordinate service and maximize shared investment. Truly, we're going to work more with the state to try to see if we can find more funding. It started this biennium, and we'll continue to work for that. We still have to put $3.5 million into the general fund, from the general fund. Susan will talk about after our workshop and the shortfall and what happened after that event.
So, as we mentioned, leading up to the workshop, we included our baseline budget and the known changes and challenges, and that did yield the $6.8 million shortfall that we discussed at the workshop. I want to make a couple clarifying points on this, though. While $6.8 million is a big number, it represents 4% of the general fund budget. And prior to the July workshop, staff have been working on this budget for several months. Department heads and the budget team have been considering various revenue enhancement and expense reduction scenarios throughout the budget process. So this brings us back to the budget workshop. The objective of the workshop was to discuss the various scenarios to achieve a balanced budget and to allow for dialogue with commissioners, department heads, along with public input, and as the mayor said, we did get quite a bit of that. So column C reflects the number from the budget workshop, the $6.4 million deficit, again, which is 4% of the general fund.
So to balance 2026 budget responsibly, we focused on both revenue enhancements and cost containment. Integrating new revenue, departments identified new grant opportunities and alternative revenue streams to reduce the reliance on the general fund. Covering costs, we reviewed services that have historically been offered at no charge and introduced or adjusted fees to better align with rising costs. We also restructured some services, particularly at the regional level, to ensure more equitable cost sharing. Optimized operations. A citywide review of operating costs helped us identify efficiencies and make targeted service adjustments when appropriate. The budget team got together, and these are the decisions we made based on the feedback from the commissioners, department heads, and public, with priorities of balancing the budget and minimizing service implications. Every director was asked how they could help bring down the costs and came back to us with solutions to those particular aspects. Budget team, in consultation with every director, found ways in which we could make it better budget. We took a thoughtful, organized-wide approach to identify where we could reduce costs without compromising core services. What you see in the next few slides are real examples of how departments stepped up. These included scaling back programs, eliminated underused resources, and aligned services with actual demand. It wasn't about the across-the-board cuts. These are targeted adjustments based on data, collaboration, and shared commitment to balancing the budget responsibly. The budget team can speak to the particulars if you have questions in the conclusion of this presentation. Oftentimes, we found state money, state grants, as well as county money to help cover some of our expenses that in the past the City of Fargo has managed on its own. This slide also highlights several structural adjustments that help us align our organization more effectively for long-term sustainability. Strategic workforce optimization. We are recommending a permanent reduction of 9.8 permanent unfilled unauthorized positions. These reductions are targeted and not across the board and focus on positions that can be absorbed through operational changes. Importantly, it's not a hiring freeze. We will continue to fill roles that are mission critical. We will also continue to evaluate future vacancies to explore consolidation or alternative service delivery models. Utility department structure. The preliminary budget includes reallocating a portion of engineering salary costs to the utility fund departments. This ensures utility rate structures fully capture the actual cost of service delivery, making future rate development more accurate and transparent. It's a cleaner, more equitable way to account for the work done in our engineering team does for the utility-related projects. Mayor position reclassified to full-time. As of June 1st, 2026, we propose shifting the mayor's role to full-time. This change will reflect the workload, increases accountability, and removes the financial barrier that may have discouraged qualified candidates in the past. It opens the door for a broader, more diverse participation in future elections by allowing individuals to fully commit to the role without needing outside employment. Susan will talk about the human capital adjustments as well.
This slide details the human capital adjustments. We have two categories. First, with department input, the budget team recommends permanent reductions of existing unfilled FTEs and the related operational adjustments to accommodate the unfilled positions. The second category is changes to funding. The health department will allocate grant funding to the equivalent of 1.25 FTEs. And then, as the mayor mentioned, engineering staff will be costed to the enterprise funds for which they're currently working, streetlights and storm sewer. And that's going to allow us to accurately capture expenses related to the utility and line our rates to cover the expenses. So the next step is a balanced budget. Column D reflects the results of the changes implemented by the budget team, both revenue enhancements and expense reductions. The result is a balanced budget at $140,287,211. No shortfall. This slide reflects the changes from 2025 to 2026 expenses. You will see that personnel remains the largest component of the general fund at 75%. Operational expenses are 24%, and the small dollar capital items are less than 1%. The right side column details changes by specific category. Most are related to personnel expenses. It includes the COLA, the health insurance, and the public safety sales tax implementation. The far bottom right shows a 6% increase over 2025. However, this does include the public safety sales tax of 4%. So if you compare apples to apples, excluding the public safety sales tax implications, the general fund increase is less than 2%. This is the revenue line item. This includes this shows the revenues. As we have talked about in previous meetings, we're very fortunate to have a diverse revenue stream. We have multiple sources. The largest is property tax. That's reflected at 33%. That hasn't shifted significantly. We also get state, local, and federal revenue sharing. We have transfers in from other departments, and then we have charges for services, franchise fees, miscellaneous, which is primarily interest, license and permits, and then the new public safety sales tax transfer in.
So we had 8.2 million in capital requests. We approved 1.8 million of the public safety sales tax requests and 3 million for the remaining departments. Our larger funded capital consists of lease payments for the fire, bumper truck and ladder truck, public works equipment, the plow truck, motor grader, tractor, and street sweeper, along with our Microsoft Office licenses, desktop computers, and laptops. As we discussed at the finance committee meeting in June, we are recommending to increase our solid waste fees. Residential garbage rates have not increased in 18 years, and we are proposing a $1 increase. Recycling was added in 2017 with a $1 increase in 2020, and we are proposing another $1 increase for a total of $2 a month for residential. Along with the minimal residential increases, we are recommending a 16% increase on commercial and roll-off collection and landfill tipping fees.
So as we mentioned earlier, we began this process with a $6.8 million shortfall. Through difficult but thoughtful decisions, we fully closed that gap without reducing core services or dipping into reserves. These are major decisions reflected in the 2026 preliminary budget as a result of thoughtful planning, collaboration, and responsible prioritization. A 3% COLA for all employees. This supports employee retention and helps us stay competitive in a tight labor market. a 1.45 general fund increase excluding public safety sales tax. This is a controlled, modest increase achieved while still addressing rising cost and demand for services. 4.5 million in cost reductions. This operating and personnel savings were shaped by our workshop discussions and department-level proposals. This was done by realigning internal service costs, including engineering costs shifted to utility funds. $2 a month increased residential garbage and recycling rates, a small adjustment to support rising costs in solid waste and recycling operations, and to ensure continued service quality. We did make sure that we enhanced the commercial rate higher to make it so residents would not have to pay as much. FTE permanent reduction. We're reducing the general fund budget by nearly 10 full-time employees by cutting the total number of authorized positions. This is a permanent cut, not temporary. These positions will be eliminated and we'll need to adjust priorities and expectations accordingly. These are not easy and will be difficult in our impacted departments, and I think as a commission we have to thank all our department heads for all the hard work they did, and some of them took more hits than others, but they did an excellent job in coming forth to us, and it was a thoughtful discussion with all of those members. Michael will go through the timetable that we have going forward and the next steps, and then we'll be open for questions.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. On slide number 2, the Mayor summarized your calendar of events. Tonight, on August 4th, you will be approving that preliminary budget, setting a public hearing date as well. That public hearing date is an input opportunity for the public to come and comment on the budget. That is being proposed for September 15th. And then following that comment period, on September 29th, the Commission will approve in final form the budget as well as the associated transfers and other components of that budget. So a lot of opportunities still to provide input and comment between now and final adoption on September 29, but just wanted to highlight that tonight we're simply establishing the preliminary budget and levy and then setting that public hearing date for September 15th. The motion tonight will read that you are approving that budget as presented and then scheduling that hearing. So that is the exact motion you'll see tonight. That hearing will be at 5:05 p.m. on September 15th. And so thank you for the opportunity to present this information to you today.
I'll open it for questions with these new mics. If you have the mic aimed towards you, even if, John, if you sit back where you're sitting, it will pick up on it. They're great mics. We tested them out this morning. So any questions by commissioners? Mr. Strand.
Thank you, Mayor, and team. This is really something to come up with a balanced budget when we don't know if we could get there, and how you got there is an achievement. And some questions I have, and I know last year we had a lot of conversations about topics of non-core mission funding issues. So, and I don't know what I see in here and what I don't see in here, so I'll just ask you, say if it's in here or not in here, then I'll comment further. Arts Partnership,
Yes.
is that 110? Or
95.
90,000, okay.
90.
And Indigenous Association,
Yes, at 30.
30,000. DCP, is that 175 or so?
Yes.
Okay. Land Trust is out for
Correct.
50,000. Emergent Prairie,
No.
out 50,000. Youth Works, in for 25,000. Snow removal, I want to say was about 45,000. Is that in? In specials
Snow
assessment?
removal is not in.
No, snow removal assistance is out.
Snow removal's out.
Zero.
A special assessment assistant remains.
Special assessments is in. So here's what I'd like to see, and I know we're working through numbers right now. I still would like to see us evolve a policy that directs in the future these non-core mission funding requests, so that it's policy-driven, and going forward, we have a policy attached to these decisions, you know, I don't want to wear my hat of the Land Trust board member, but I am. I'm a founder of it, and they really appreciate the support the city has given them, and the Land Trust wouldn't exist right now, for example, without the city's partnerships. But there's others I think we could trim too, conceivably, if we needed to. Just me, all right, just me, so I want to see a policy. That's where I'm aiming, is I'd like to see a policy for these non-core mission funding requests that going forward routinely are handled this way and this lane by these people.
And I think Commissioner Shan, what you'd like is a policy, so we can refer to the policy, then as a commission, say, you might qualify, you may not qualify, and here are the reasons. Concur with you that we've not had a strict policy up to this point, so there's no harm in doing that. We'd have to, as a commission, kind of organize that and send staff to work on that and bring back proposals.
And one, clarifying, I believe out of this budget are Martin Luther King events and Juneteenth?
Correct.
Those are also additional.
They're being turned over to the community to support.
Trims, exactly.
And if I could also clarify, Commissioner, one group not referenced, but the Economic Development Corporation funding is proposed to be picked up by Cass County government. Cass County also funds the Economic Development Corporation that would be defunded out of our budget.
So the county is helping us out. We normally put 100,000 in that. The county is going to fund that for us, so. Mr. Pipcorn? No?
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment that, so we're getting the budget proposed at 12 o'clock, and then you want us to vote on it at 5 o'clock. So to me, that's totally unacceptable. That's not giving the, first of all, us a chance to review it. To have 5 hours is ridiculous. So I obviously will be voting no for passing the preliminary budget 5 hours from now.
The preliminary budget is basically the first step of the process, so I fully expect that there's going to be continuing dialogue, and then the final budget is not until September, so we'll have the public input and additional time for commissioners' questions.
So you're telling me this is appropriate to show it to us and then 5 hours later have us vote on it? That's totally incorrect. Thank you.
All the commissioners saw it on a Monday session, which we discussed, Commissioner Pipcorn, and the other issues, we're just setting the maximum. You can cut from it. You can do a variety of different things over the next month. So it's not limiting the commissioner's ability to change anything on the budget. It's truly just a preliminary budget. In the old days, as you recall, we could set a mill levy, and then you could back that mill levy down if you came in with suggestions. We can't do that with the new mandate by the state. The state, in a sense, you take your 3% or you don't, and we're not actually going anywhere over the 3%. So we're within the confines of the state. All commissioners will have the ability to talk to the budget team and change the budget any way you want, because my final budget isn't. This is truly just a preliminary budget. And I thought with the ability of all commissioners to weigh in when we had that budget meeting, you guys could have budgeted, and we took all the suggestions. I think Mike and Susan met with any commissioner who wanted to meet after that meeting. And this thing really reflects, in my mind, a lot of what the commissioners have already told us. So I'm at loss of, we come in with a balanced budget, we got a maximum, we go, and you still can influence it. So it's not taking any of that away from you.
So, Mr. Chair, I just will say, this is the first I've seen it, and this is the first time the public has seen it. And so the public, the people that I represent, a lot of them will have lots of things to see in this budget, and they want to have opportunities. And to have us vote on it 5 hours later, I don't care what excuses you make, that's not appropriate.
Commissioner Kolpak.
I have a couple of comments and some, thank you, I forget that, thank you, and some questions. First of all, I do appreciate the work of staff along with department heads. And it's really important, as I've shared with leadership at admin, that the department heads who know and understand their daily operations very much have final say in what's cut and what's not cut. So having said that, I'll also add, I appreciated the extra time we had since the budget workshop, which we learned some takeaways from. And I appreciated the transparency and approach of adding that step this year. Since that time, I know I've had at least 5 meetings with admin. We all were given that opportunity as commissioner to dig in and understand the details. I feel like I truly do understand this budget and where we landed and why. I think for the public, just to clarify, there was some confusion because, and I know we had some public comments following that open workshop from a citizen who happens to be here today, that it was a confusing to follow and understand the proposed recommendations at that time that comprised the $6 million gap. And I think to clarify, those were all just ideas at that point. And since that time, other ideas were uncovered, other ideas were brought forward to get to the balanced budget, and it was a Herculean effort by all, so I appreciate that. Regarding the airport, I've been studying the airport's budget. I understand the politics of the city supporting the airport. We've heard loudly and clearly from legislators and our congressional delegation on and off, but that it's important for the city to show continued support for the airport. One of the takeaways that I've requested from admin and legal is that we revisit the memorandum of understanding now that basically mill levies are moot because we have the 3% cap. I think it would be a much more efficient process annually if we had some triggers in place that were clearly understood up front. And with some, for instance, reserve levels, parking revenues, there's a number of things now we could consider that could be triggering in that memorandum of understanding, but it makes a lot of sense to revisit that now with a 3% cap. Additionally, we talked about regional contributions for the airport. My understanding is the Airport Authority is pursuing that, so I would support that work as well. One of the outcomes from the budget workshop was that we have technology that continues to increase. I think one of the takeaways in my request that I've shared with the administration and the mayor is we have some opportunities for additional cuts in technology for sustainability, both strategically but anticipated. For instance, SaaS technology now, software as a service, as opposed to legacy technology. We have opportunities to look there. I'm sorry, Mr. Pepcorn, did you have a question for me? I said I'm making statements.
Order, please.
Excuse me, Commissioner Pepcorn, I've always shown you respect. I expect the same. Additionally, I appreciate the fact that there's a 3% COLA as part of the process. No COLA was a deal breaker for me. I would like as a takeaway to understand the anticipated cost for an HR compensation study, since that has been identified as a priority for next year as well, which I certainly understand and support, but I would like to know that. And then lastly, just some clarification on preliminary versus final, and the ability for departments to really understand if there is for instance, the $250,000 identified in the technology budget, what does that mean? Where is that coming from? We have some time for some final clarification on what those cuts actually are. And we also have the ability perhaps to move some other things around as long as our revenues don't change and revenue sources, if that makes sense. So those would be my comments and my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify, we did talk to the airport, met with Paula Ekman a little bit about taking a mill out of the mill. That was not, they felt that they had too much of a debt structure to do that. We did have a good discussion, Commissioner Strand, with her. I did make a formal request for $500,000 to help us with the health insurance increase. Their board did consider that and they laid out their budget and feel that they're going to have to go into the reserves, could not afford it at this time. However, what did come out of that meeting, John, which I think was very thankful or very good, is we have some specials between us and the airport, and they're going to form a subcommittee to see how they can help us pay off those specials. So I think that would, thank you for your help in that, because that came out very positive. But we did hear a clear message to your point, Commissioner Kolpak, that their debt structure is such that they need it this time. But I think, Commissioner Strand, it would be a good idea to maybe back the memorandum of understanding. Is there a point in which you could look at decreasing the amount of money that the airport gets in the future? And I think you, when you did the original proposal with them years ago, we had talked about is whenever would that possibly go away? And then to the question of regionalization, the board has requested, or the commission has requested, that the airport look at a regional airport, and so that may have asked them to fund a study to look into that, because there are some government constraints on that. We may have to go to the legislative body to get any of those taken care of. Commissioner Turnberg.
No, this is good information. There's just a lot to go through, so I'm not prepared to make a statement yet. I do have notes from our budget workshop, and I think there's certainly additional cuts that we could still make. So that's all.
Okay, and then part of that workshop, we came up with some ideas to get some other funding. So when some of those have changed, so in the health department especially, I know we got some state grants and we also got some county grants. So some of the modalities that you'd seen on the nursing has changed, and some of the things in the health department have changed. So I'll ask Jen to share with you as well, so you know that those changes have been made. Any other, Commissioner Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. I have one question I'd just like to learn more about is the reserve status after this budget process. Where's our reserve sit or expected to sit?
Since it's a balanced budget, it's not going to decrease the cash of the reserves. The reserve percentage will go down slightly because the fund is getting bigger. However, we do have the land sales pending, and so that will help, and that has not been programmed into any spending. That land sale will go completely to the fund balance, so that will be very beneficial.
And my next question is just balcony view. You know, we work through budget items and line items and categories and all these things, and then in the process, it sometimes appears that in our work, our efforts, that we're, for example, very critical, for example, of the state's 3% cap imposition on us. I don't know that we're opposed to it or not. I just know that we're challenged by this change in the funding. Now that we're through this process, do we have some observations about how good or bad, or did it take the rug under our feet? I don't think it did, but I'm just curious how we, because the state really made some major efforts to have the people's property taxes paid up to $1,600 by them. So how's this all ending up in the end? This 3% cap and how it impacts us and going forward?
I think a general comment is that it just, as we've talked about before, it removes some of the flexibility. So, this year we were able to accommodate it. What if we need to build a new fire station? Or what if there's other, large expenses that we would typically increase mill levies for? We just don't have that flexibility now to do that. So that's the implication that I see. But within this budget, we were able to work around it.
And Mayor, one last question. The Carlson Library is in your budget? We've been hearing about arts, and we've been hearing about the airport. We've been hearing about
Carlson and Northport.
And Northport.
Don't bring up libraries, John, no.
I'm just saying,
Yeah, it's all in there. I think your comment is good. It takes away a lot of local control. So for the commission to decide it has to do certain things in the future, it does limit you in that ability to do that. We've actually, on our budget team, we have worked 4 or 5 months, Mike, has it been, basically on this issue. And it's repetitively working it. And Susan initially said, let's do 2%, 5%, or 10% cut in your department. And that's difficult because in public works, right, we maximize everybody we use. So I think the lesson learned, we'll be coming out with lessons learned as we go along here and reflect those, because the legislative body has said, tell us the goods and the bads of it and what do you think about that. And I think we're going to ask as commissioners too, is what you think the goods and the bad of that. And we will open that up for dialogue after we're done with the budget. Commissioner Kolpak?
Yeah, I was going to add that because at the debrief with the legislators, with the chamber, they were very transparent about the fact that they expect changes need to be made to this over time. They did the best job they could with this first version, but it's going to be really important for the cities to continue to document the impacts of the 3% cap, the real restrictions, and capturing what normally would be a request to operate a city and is not even coming forward. I know that, Susan, you said that the department heads came forward very understanding it's a very austere year because of the 3% cap, but over time, you can't continue to ask for nothing in a growing city. And so the more we can capture about what we're not doing and we would have asked for, the better it is to inform the legislature. And my final point is that our relationships with our local area legislators continues to be more and more important. So we have to continue to collaborate with them.
And just to close it out, Commissioner Strand, the issue I have is if we had growth like we normally have, this would have been a harder budget. So the economy's down, the real estate market's down, those types of things are down. But if the city continues to grow at 7 to 10%, the budget will be strapped because you have to expand into those areas and people expect services in those areas. So the city of Fargo has difficulty when we grow at, 5, 10, 20%, or 5 or 10%, then it's much harder to do your budget. So I thank you all for your time today. Appreciate that, understanding the constraints of trying to get this preliminary budget done. I appreciate you looking at this tonight. I understand Commissioner Pickford's concerns, but preliminary budget is as high as it goes. You can make changes to the budget. It's not the final budget. This is the preliminary budget. So thank you for your time.